After separating from Soma and Shimada, we track Hijikata's journey to Benten Fortress, hoping to uncover the whereabouts of his remains. At the end of last year, the former shogunate troops were nearly 3,000 strong when they reached the shores of Ezel. The Imperial Army gave them a rude awakening, dwindling their forces down to 2,000 over the course of months. Investigating the reasons for their sudden decrease was a path I confidently disinterested in pursuing. The truth, I feared, would only break my heart more. Allegedly, Imperial forces brought over 5,000 soldiers to squash any resistance punitively. The outcome of the war was determined before a single soldier set foot on the battlefield. The timeline is as follows. May 9th, 1869. Imperial forces reached the coast of Ezo. June 11th, 1869. War between the Imperials and the government of Hakodate began. June 14th, 1869. The resistance fighters surrendered at Benten Fortress. A total of 92 men surrendered at Benten. Among them were 13 Shinsengumi warriors. June 18th, 1869. Goryo-kaku, the last remaining stronghold, offered their terms of surrender to the Imperial Army. The Boshin War, as the conflict later became known, between the Imperial Army and the fragments of the Tokugawa shogunate, had ended. Boshin War, a war that included several conflicts during the period from 1868 to 1869. It signaled the end of the feudal daimyo system, the restoration of imperial rule, and the beginning of Japan's modernization. As for the search for Hijikata's remains, it proved to be as futile as an effort as anything else in Ezo. I like to believe that some generous soul, out of fear in handing over Hijikata's remains to the Imperials, honorably buried his body somewhere out of reach. Kazama, you mentioned something to me about how humans only wage wars for wealth and power, but do you honestly still believe that? Prior to our first time in Ezo, I was sure that he would have nodded without giving it a second thought, but there was a noticeable shift in his attitude. After killing both father and Kaoru, at witnessing the end of the Shinsengumi firsthand, seeing all that they had died for, perhaps Kazama had an epiphany, or, at the very least, was more receptive to notions that he once viewed as foreign, if not beneath him.
少なくともこの蝦夷地で戦っていた連中にとってはそうではなかっただろうな。鳥羽伏見の戦の頃ならいざ知らず、趨勢が決した後にもまだ勝てるなどと考えるほど土方という男は愚かではあるまい。
Good point. I wasn't sure what sort of magic the Shinsengumi conjured to keep hold of the resistance in the face of certain death. As Kazama had described, they were keenly aware of the odds, yet somehow were steadfast in their convictions against the Imperial Army.
ここはおそらく夢にしがみつき侍を捨てきれなかった奴らがたどり着いたところだ。
But everyone in the Shinsengumi...
己の心に思い描いた夢を忘れることができず、新しい時代に乗れなかった。乗ることができなかった。大バカどもだ。
As painful as it was to listen, I understood why Kazuma may have felt that way, but It was something with which I totally disagreed. They were warriors. It's not like they couldn't keep up with the times. It's that they refused to do so out of principle. I'm certain they had a good reason for staying true to their convictions.
お前はどうも早合点しすぎる嫌いがあるな。大バカだとは言ったが、連中を嫌っているわけではない。ああいった生き方は、個人の志より一族の永続をこそ望む我々には、決して真似ができぬからな。
Kazama was speaking vaguely, but it was likely the greatest compliment that he could have ever given to anyone, much more in reference to the Shinsengumi. In a way, I detected a hint of envy in Kazama's statement, as if he wished there were opportunities to put his needs before the collective needs of his kin. A long silence stretched between us, broken only by my timid musings. Where do you plan on going from here, Kazama?
我々鬼は遥か昔から人と関わらずひっそりと暮らしてきた。その暮らしに戻るだけだ。二度と人間どもと関わるつもりはない。
I see. I had never thought to consider that Kazama, too, was a transplant in this world. How did he cope with the strife, with the pettiness of human conflict? The risk, of course, was losing touch with his concept of home in these distant conditions.
新政府の面々は、こたびの戦に関わった我々を野放しにしておくほど間抜けではあるまい。急いで西国へ戻り、連中の手が及ばぬところへ身を隠す支度をせねばならぬ。
Back to your clan. This meant my journey with Kazama had ended, and it was time for us to part ways. Our time together was over the span of 1.5 years. There was a part of myself that slid into some fantasy that the two of us would travel together indefinitely.
お前はどうする?
Each of my affairs were concluded. In a way, I was without direction and purpose. I was, in no small measure, alone. I haven't decided yet. I do think, however, that I'll stick around in Ezo for the time being. I don't want this memory to fade. I'm not ready to relinquish the resting place of the Shinsengumi. While I was in the middle of answering him, Kazama brought his fingernails close to his eye level, gazing at them with disinterest. He what? Bitch.
初めは希少な女鬼という理由で興味を持っただけだった。やがてお前を通じて新選組の連中と関わることになり、道中父や兄を失うこととなっても、お前は決して前に進むことを諦めはしなかったな。
Well, it was the first time Kazama had ever complimented me outright. In all honesty, I had no idea how to respond. I didn't really have a choice. Father, Kaoru, and the Shinsengumi. I just dealt with their losses as they came, as there was no use in dwelling on the past.
謙遜する必要はあるまい。少なくともお前と共に新選組の連中を追ってこなければ、俺は奴らの本当の姿にも気づかぬままだった。まさかお前に教えられるとはな。
Kazama was almost never one to speak bluntly with me, but this moment felt so different. It confused me at first, having become too familiar with his sardonic remarks to know if they were genuine. Ugh. All of a sudden, his arms were outstretched towards me. By the time I realized what was occurring, his face, stunningly handsome in spite of his intimidating expression, was merely inches from in front of mine. My heart fluttered like a pinwheel, barely registering that my and Cosmo's lips were pressed together. Numbness trickled from the top of my head, and although I wanted to scream, I couldn't. Hold on! Wanted to scream? Okay. That is a response, I suppose. Trying to get my composure back. Instead, my lips remained shut, vexed and mute. It was strange, though. For some reason, I hadn't minded it at all. My limbs were frozen, offering the meekest of resistances in the form of no movement at all. His lashes tickled the side of my cheek, and only up close had I noticed his immaculate skin. Kazama flicked his tongue gently inside of my mouth, which was softer than I anticipated. Holy shit, Kazama! Before I knew it, Kazama and I were locked in an intense throw. That's a word I've never seen before. There was an inexorable? Throwing me words I do not know. Inexorable draw to Kazama. An energy that tingled my face just from the touch of his lips. All of my deep longings were awakened by the heat of our sensuous kiss, making him incapable of focusing on anything else. Just when I thought my heart would burst, he relinquished his hold on my body just as quickly as he had imposed it. For a moment, I was totally speechless, perhaps wide-eyed enough to elicit a small smile from Kazama.
今の口づけは俺とお前が他人ではない証だ。
Where did that come from? I somehow managed to escape my stupor long enough to ask him a question.
心の整理がついたら俺のところへ来い。
Wait, so you mean... Why was he behaving so cryptically? All of this felt so unclear to me. I was still reeling from our kiss. I struggled to form words, much less a sentence. Kazama, however, was unconcerned with my incoherent ramblings and continued on without bringing attention to my blushed cheeks.
まあ、来なければ迎えに来るまでだがな。
Although we had accomplished everything we set out to do in Ezo, it seemed as though Kazama had some unfinished business of his own to attend to. Granted, I wasn't wholly unopposed to the idea. Eh? Holy shit! As we bookended one chapter of our lives, it was time to start anew, and for the first time in years, I was ready for whatever life had to throw at me. I could finally shed my skin and blossom with nothing to tether me down. Oh, okay. Ah. Game. There it is. There's the final chapter. I knew it. I knew something was missing. Let's see. Does this add anything? Let's see. Because it's still in the bottom half. January 1870. I was alone, bundled in a thick blanket during a blustery winter day in my childhood home of Edo. My, it's freezing. Guess I shouldn't be surprised. Vapor escaped my mouth with each exhale. My restlessness was further spurred by this insistent urge to clean the aging homestead. So I entered the chilly yard, gathering the dead leaves scattered along the grass into a neat pile. The season brought with it festivities that had the town buzzing, and I watched townspeople hustling up and down the street. After returning to Edo, my first order of business was writing Dr. Matsumoto a heartfelt letter. He replied immediately, expressing sincere relief after having been notified of my safety. Dr. Matsumoto made a point of iterating that I could reach out to him should I ever require help in a tight bind, which warmed my heart. My second order of business was writing to Sen. She insisted that I reside with her in Yase village, but although I appreciated her generous offer, I refused. It was because, just as I was pondering to myself,
あら、千鶴ちゃん。この間はありがとうね。うちの子の風邪を見てくれて。
all of a sudden, I was approached by my next-door neighbor who sung words of praise to me. Oh, please. It was no problem at all. How is he doing?
ええ、おかげさまで。行動さんが診療所を閉めちまって、あんたがいきなり今日に行っちまった時は驚いたけど、こうして無事に帰ってきてくれてよかったわ。それよりあんた、ひょっとして今年は一人で年越しかい？
Yes. Sadly, my father passed away, so I'll have to make do.
危ないわよ、女の一人暮らしなんて。戦が終わったとはいえ、まだまだ世の中物騒なんだから。これからどうするつもりなんだい？診療所を続けるのかい？
That's something I have yet to figure it out myself.
何にせよ、一人じゃ何かと不便でしょ？そうだ、なんならいい人を紹介してあげましょうか。
Well...
実は両国の橋のたもとに薬の問屋さんができてね。そこの息子さんが。
Oh, sure. I shall check it out when I get the chance.
そうかい？年の釣り合いもちょうどいいと思うんだけどね。まあ、お見合いの口ならいくらでもあるから、いつでも声をかけておくれよ。
My neighbor flashed a bright grin, nodding her head politely before waving me goodbye. It was kind of her to express an interest in my well-being and all, but... finding suitors, huh? Maybe it is time for me to start thinking about settling down. I had still had some wounds to lick, so I found myself a little too preoccupied to worry about it just yet. If I had to marry someone, then... I was suddenly thrust into a flashback. Something about my conversation with my neighbor evoked that moment in Ezo. I mean, we were together for almost 2 years. Kazama was so patient with me during the tumultuous period following my separation from the Shinsengumi. When I lost father and Kaoru, he was a shoulder that I could cry on and offered me words of comfort. He even escorted me to Ezo and stood beside me as we witnessed the end of the Shinsengumi. I'm not sure if the memories we shared together could ever be bested by another man, as if anyone else could ever understand all that I'd been through. Although, Kazama told me that he would come for me whenever my heart was ready. So much time had passed that I began to wonder if he truly meant it. He said that demons always keep their promises. Just as I muttered to myself, Was I hallucinating? I rubbed my eyes incredulously, but the image didn't change. He was here, standing in front of me, appearing like a specter from an ethereal mist. It was something out of a dream. And then he spoke.
千鶴、迎えに来たぞ。
As soon as I heard his familiar, arrogant tone, the hairs along the back of my neck stood up.
なんだその顔は。久方ぶりにこの俺に会ったというのに出迎えの言葉もなしか。
There was no mistaking him. Almost 6 months had passed since we spoke, yet he was his usual callous self. Honestly, I couldn't expect anything less from Kazama. So, you really did come for me. All of the tears that I thought were dried and left in Ezo began welling up once more. I wanted nothing less than for him to see me in such a state, but my heart was untied. Nothing could be done.
約束は守ると言っただろう。それとも信じていなかったのか。
Well, whether or not I believe you is one thing, but you can't blame me for starting to worry. I mean, I've received no correspondence from you in half a year's time. My eyes shifted away from Kazama, and I rushed to wipe my tears from my puffy, swollen eyes. I was my only friend throughout this period, save for the harsh and lonesome winter.
それほどまでに寂しかったか。
Just for old time's sake. Bitch! I never said that! There was no hiding how much I missed him. But he was so frustratingly smug about it, as if it were his intention to keep me waiting all along, which made me hesitant to admit it. Just as I was about to offer my own snarky response, Kazama stopped me with an outstretched arm. Then he drew me in closer, pressing his lips against mine just like in Ezo. Instinctively, my head jerked backwards. Just, what do you think you're doing?
さっきも言ったはずだが、お前を迎えに来た。
I froze. I'm sorry. I need to laugh. I don't know where the laugh came from. It's just appearing and I don't know why. His crimson eyes beamed in front of me. A well of emotion stirred tirelessly from my stomach, glancing back and forth between euphoric joy and trepidation. My heart was pulled in 1,000 directions.
我が風間一族の里を別の場所へ移す支度は整えてきた。新政府の連中は立ち入れぬ場所だ。そこでなら静かに暮らせよう。あとはお前だけだ。観念してついてくるがいい。
Hold on a minute. I could just up and leave everything so sudden.
急ではないし、これ以上待つつもりもない。俺は5ヶ月もお前を待ったのだからな。いや、5ヶ月どころではないか。お前を新選組の連中に預けていた期間を含めればな。
I wouldn't think that our last interaction would have changed things, but he was as pompous as ever. I was so aghast with embarrassment that I had nothing to say, as if he would listen to my reply. But while the world around us sped into a new age, Kazama was a constant, unbending, and unbroken, and always by my side.
返事はどうした？俺と共に来るつもりはあるか？
I searched inside myself for the right words to say, leaving an awkward space to which Kazama thinned his scarlet eyes gleefully.
確かめる必要などないか。お前の本心などとうに分かっているのだからな。
He slowly closed the distance between us even more than he already had. His strong, thick arms covered me in warmth.
千鶴。
Then he forced his lips upon mine, but this was different. It was as if he possessed a sixth sense to read all of my thoughts intuitively and on command. But I knew he was telling the truth. From the moment we parted in Ezo, my heart yearned for his tender embrace. It was a feeling that I cherished. Kazama might have been a pain. Kazama might have been a pain! But he was my pain, and I was all the better for it. Kazama is a pain! I can't. Oh god, the achievement is Kazati. Why? Why is it Kazati? Fuck you, whoever did the achievements for this game.